Hello and welcome to Salute Your Sports. Common Enchev here with Tom Castleman. Ready for a big show today, Tom? We'll go over the thrilling CFP semifinal games. Both games lived up to the hype and then some. Who's going to win the national title game now? Is it Michigan? Is it Washington? A lot of irony here because if it was the old BCS system, this would have been the national championship, the one versus the two, Michigan and Washington. Plus, it's week 18 in the NFL. What bubble team is in? Which team is out when it comes to the playoffs, when it comes to division races? It's been such a crazy season in the NFL that I think this little tidbit kind of symbolizes the season as a whole. The Buffalo Bills with the win will be the number 2 overall seed in the AFC. But if they lose, there's a scenario and a likely one where they miss out the playoffs altogether. So imagine like 2 and 8 seed, one game decides that. That's just like mind-blowing, Tom. It is really something crazy to think about. We'll have our betting locks of the week this week, which, for the first time in weeks, we both went over 500. Winning record on the show. How about that, Tom? Maybe it's that new year, the first show of the new year. We are getting started the right way. M-I-Z, baby.
COU, yeah, the Missouri Tigers winning a kind of an ugly game in the Cotton Bowl, but
I thought you liked defense, Tom.
I do like defense. I like a little bit of a mix-up, though, and really, there's a difference between defense and bad football, if we're being quite honest. In Ohio State, with as many opt-outs as they had,
surprisingly not many, actually, Tom. They didn't have many opt-outs.
The significant ones, though. I mean,
they had their receiver and then their quarterbacks in the transfer portal, but they didn't actually have many. I looked, their whole team pretty much, I think they had like 4 maybe. I can't remember what it was like. And there was like 1 or 2 that were injured. I think actually technically the only opt-out was actually Marvin Harrison Jr. And then they had a couple injuries in the transfer portal. Not the 27 Florida State and Georgia each had, which, by the way, each had 27. Each of them had 27. Not just Florida State. Georgia had 27 guys out, and they still won 63-3. Who belongs in this CFP? Maybe that's a statement of the week later on. But we'll have sports trivia, betting locks, statements of the week, and more. Cannot wait to get started, Tom. The first show of 2024. It feels weird to say. But I am pumped, ready to get started. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Also getting used to saying the new year, as everybody has, when this thing comes around. But yeah, we'll start off with a quick recap on some of the games that were quite significant on New Year's Day. Of course, we'll go with the first one, the 1 and 4 seed Alabama and Michigan. Michigan winning in overtime, 27-20. And then we also had the Washington and Texas game going down to kind of like that final play, final drive type of scenario.
Where both went down to the final play. Both games.
Exactly. I mean, both games really incredibly exciting. So it feels like there's kind of no wrong answer here when the question is posed as which football game, semifinal football game, was more exciting. Because I think you can really go with either one. I mean, of course, for me getting into it, going with a sudden death overtime type of scenario, especially the way that college does it, where everybody's getting the ball in the red zone pretty much. It's basically coming down to, okay, what are your 4 or 5 best plays that are going to get you close to the goal line and ultimately into the end zone? And that's pretty, a pretty thrilling way of doing things. But on the other side, you also just have points between Texas and Washington. Going back and forth, pulling up their game script. I think the largest lead was 9 points for Washington looking at that one. Okay, technically 10 points for Washington in the third quarter as they went up from tied at 21 to 31 to 21. But Texas certainly in the fourth quarter keeping it interesting throughout. So, I mean, is it too much of a cop-out for me to say both games were equally exciting, both games coming down to the wire as they did, not really being out of hand at either point in time? Or, Common, do you see things a little bit differently?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's really, really tough. I think the Bama-Michigan game was a 1-score game the whole way, and it had the overtime, which is cool. But there was, like you talk about, the Mizzou Ohio State game, good defense, bad offense. There was some bad offense in this game. There was some sloppy play, some missed kicks, some turnovers that weren't necessarily forced. I'm a points guy, so I'm going to lean the Washington, Texas game, 37-31. I mean, Michael Penix Jr. was unbelievable. I mean, talk about the draft class. Everyone's got, Caleb Williams and Drake May on the top of their boards. I mean, I think Caleb Williams is the top quarterback, but I mean, I look at Penix Jr., I look at Jaden Daniels. There's a lot of good quarterbacks in this draft for sure. He looked really, really good. I know he's older. I know he's had some injuries. He's not your traditional, 22-year-old kid. But, he had 430 pass yards, more than 500 total yards of offense for Washington, just under 500 for Texas. So that game to me was a little bit more exciting. I think the back and forth, the touchdowns, it actually really wasn't back and forth because, they didn't have a major lead, but Washington did not trail the entire game. Like, it was tied at multiple points, but
Sure.
Washington never trailed. And yet Texas somehow had one play to win the game, and Quinn Ewers basically almost throws the ball out of bounds. That was a tough look. Just like Alabama, I get what they're trying to do. Jalen Milroe, their best athlete, is a great running quarterback. In that 4th and goal situation for me, I don't really, unless it's on the 1-yard line, which they were more on like the 4 or 5, I just don't like any scenario where you don't throw the ball in the end zone. Because if you throw the ball in the end zone, you for sure give yourself a chance at a touchdown. Maybe there's a flag, maybe you get an automatic first down. I just absolutely hated that play call for Alabama in that scenario. And I hated Texas's execution at the end too as well. So, I mean, it really came down to one play for both of those powerhouses, and they both, quite frankly, blew it. So I lean more exciting Washington and Texas because of the points. But really the difference in these games was, for all the points, all the quarterbacks, the receivers on the outside, it kind of came down to the big guys up front. I mean, Michigan had 6 sacks. Bama had 1 sack. You look at Texas, no sacks against Washington. None, Tom. 0 sacks.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Washington had 2, which isn't a lot, but they had 6 tackles for loss. They did put some pressure on Quinn Ewers. So it was really the battle with the trenches, defensive line, offensive line. The big guys up front were better for Washington, better for Michigan, and that is ultimately what won them the games. Both amazing games. I mean, I know we talked about this on the show. It is kind of 4 evenly matched teams in the CFP this year. I don't really even think that Michigan, I mean, they had a couple sloppy plays, but so did Bama. So I think this is one of those scenarios where if you play these games 100 times, one of them wins 55, maybe 60. I don't think there's a team that I could say would win either of these matchups, most of the time. I actually think the best team, if I'm picking one, is probably Georgia, who won 63-3 in their bowl game. Like I mentioned, a lot of guys out for Florida State, but 27 guys out for Georgia, same as FSU, including Georgia's best player, Brock Bowers. Georgia had their off game in the SEC title game, which was really, really unfortunate timing. But awesome CFP, and it's going to be, a lot of fun next year with the 12 teams. There's always going to be somebody who's going to be unhappy. But why I love the new system, Tom, is because if you're a 1-loss, Power 5 team, you will be in the 12-team playoff. Because if you lose 2 games, you can't say that, they had the one-off game. There was 2 opportunities that you lost. So there's not going to be that any team where you can really say, oh my gosh, this is such a great injustice, because all the undefeated group of 5 teams will get in. And they go undefeated, they're getting in. And all the Power 5 teams with 1 loss or less, all of them are going to get in. So I'm pumped for the new system, but what a great way to end the Final Four.
Going forward.
What'd you say?
It's not going to be Power 5 going forward. The Pac-12 is pretty much done.
Power 4, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless there's a bunch of teams going into the Pac-12. We'll see what happens. But I think there's like 2 Pac-12 teams left, Tom.
That's why I named my college pick'em the way I named it, the Pac-2.
Yeah, the ACC and the Pac-12, though, or not that Pac-12, the Big 12, the ACC are still alive, although I know the Big 12 is losing, its two top dogs, Oklahoma and Texas, but technically there is some power conferences alive, kind
Yeah,
of.
yeah. No, I like again, those were really exciting games, and of course, now kind of turning our sights to Michigan and Washington
Oof.
for the national championship. Which really, in the old days, this would have been a great Rose Bowl matchup. They're going to be playing this game in Houston, I believe, but this would be great to see out in California again, just because of all the sight lines and just the story, the lore of the Rose Bowl. But coming into this one, we saw a lot of points from Washington, not a lot of defense. That's been the story for them all season long. And quite frankly, I don't know if I want to continue trotting out the trope of this is a team that isn't as good in the trenches, isn't as good on both sides of the ball. They're not as tough as, say, Oregon or Texas. These teams that have
Well,
an
they're better
advantage.
than
Because
Oregon.
you can say the same thing about Michigan now, where it's okay, Michigan has a really strong defense and a good complementary offense, whereas Washington, not very good on defense. Washington has continually overcome that trope throughout the season. Currently, 4-point underdogs to Michigan, just like they were to Texas. So, Common, is there a path for kind of not like the most underdog champion that we've had in the CFP, but for as many times as folks have picked against Washington in these big theme games with Oregon twice, with Texas and now Michigan.
You and
I
I
mean,
included.
this yeah, exactly. This feels like they could be like the most unlikely champion of in the college football playoff. Do you see them getting the victory over Big Blue, or do you see Jim Harbaugh getting the championship for alma mater and perhaps going straight to the NFL from there now that he's checked everything off the list that he wanted
Hmm.
to do in college? Or who knows, maybe he stays and keeps things interesting with Michigan. There's a lot of different ways that whole intrigue can potentially go.
I'm
But
hoping he's going to the Bears, but he's going to go coach Justin Herbert and the Chargers, Tom. That's what's going to happen.
oh, okay.
Yeah, but we'll see. So believe this or not, Tom, you know me, I usually like to go the favorites. I'm about 48% sure Washington can win this game. I think it's a total toss up. I don't even know if I'm going to bet the line just because 4 points is not a very big line. I could even easily see this scenario where there's an overtime game. Michigan ends up winning by 7, kind of like against Bama, where they covered, but did they really? Not in
Yeah.
regulation type thing. I may be staying away from this, line altogether. Washington just keeps proving us wrong game after game after game. We're always saying, like, like your DVOA, like, how good is a team? Well, they're really good at winning close games, and I don't see Michigan blowing them out. Washington, Tom, 5 straight games decided by 1 score or less. 8 out of 14 games this season decided by 1 score or less. 2 other games were 9 and 10 points each, and one of them was like a kind of like a late score that was really a 1-score game the whole game. Outside of their first 4 games, which are their cupcake games of the schedule, every game has been by 10 points or less after the first 4 games this year. So it's like every single week their games go down to the wire and they find a way to win. Now, their offense is incredible. They have one of the
Mhm.
best quarterbacks in college football. They have one of the best wide receivers in college football. Both of these guys will be NFL stars. Penix Jr., I love the look of a lefty. He's got a great arm. He's got great touch. Washington most definitely, Tom, has a fighting chance in this game. They have a real opportunity to win. And just what a shame it would be, the last year of the Pac-12, and it's, probably the best year the Pac-12 has ever had in the CFP era. I know Oregon made the championship game, but they lost. There were so many
Mhm.
good Pac-12 teams this year that USC was struggling in that conference. But, the matchup, you look at it, Michigan is first in points per game allowed, 9.5, 15th in points with 36. Washington 11th in points with 37.6, but 50th in points against, 23.6. Now, Washington's defense has been clutch. It's been timely. but it has not been great over a whole game.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm wanting to talk myself into picking Washington because I want Washington to win. They're just such a fun story. But I'm gonna pick Michigan. Not very confident, but I mean, you kind of saw the numbers. You know, Michigan's defense is way better than Washington's defense, whereas Washington's offense is only marginally better than Michigan's offense. Now, they're very different offenses. Michigan is a clearly better running team. They're great at running the ball. Obviously, Washington is a passing team. They're great at passing the ball. But if you look at the cumulative, points and yards, the numbers are fairly similar. Washington a little bit better, but the defensive numbers are very, very skewed in Michigan's way. And you saw Michigan have really shut down everybody they've played. I know that Ohio State doesn't have the great quarterback it used to have,
Mhm.
but they have so many weapons. They did put up a lot of points this year, except for against Michigan and Mizzou. You look at what they did against Alabama, which is a pretty high-powered offense. Again, not quite the team it used to be, but Alabama really, really struggled to move the ball. In particular, the first half, they didn't have many answers for Michigan. We're in the points era, but I kind of seen that little bit of a shift where maybe defense winning championships is kind of making its return, Tom Castleman. So I just think Michigan is far better on the defensive front. They're better, up front, offensive line, defensive line. I know Washington has the better skill guys on the outside, the better quarterback, but ultimately, I think Michigan is a more well rounded team. I think the Wolverines win a close one, but I am not betting my mortgage on that for sure, Tom. I'll say that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I believe it was it last week's show, your statement of the week, Ham, was that you don't know anything, you don't know how anything's gonna turn out. Well, that's
No,
exactly why I'm going with Washington
sure, do
on
it.
this one. I'm going with Washington because one thing I don't know is what's a good quarterback that Michigan has played this year? I mean, the best probably
Jalen
is
Milrow.
Kyle McCord.
Jalen Milrow.
Eh,
Jalen Milrow's the best quarterback they've played.
he's not really that good though.
He's good. He had a
Not
really
that
good
good.
season passing the ball the back half of the year. And they made him look not as good. He's good, Tom. He's got good touch. You see
He's
that
not
sideline
that
pass?
good.
That was an NFL throw. He's pretty good.
He's not Michael Penix Jr. good is what I'm getting
That's
at. And this
fair.
is
I'll
the
agree.
situation where looking at Michigan's defense and looking at the schedule that they played this year and even the conference. I mean, not great quarterback play at all in the Big Ten. I mean, we're looking at an Iowa team that had an all-time great defense and an all-time awful offense.
Mm-hmm.
Putting up 0 points in a bowl game for crying aloud with a month of preparation.
Yikes.
I'm going with Washington on this one, and I know typically it's kind of in football, it's if you're good in the trenches, if you're better in the trenches, you're more likely to win. I mean, we saw that happen with Buccaneers and Chiefs in the Super Bowl, but the difference is that in college football, you're not playing a similar level of talent every single week, and I think that kind of skews the numbers just a little bit. I mean, Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, I mean, the fantastic games against a Texas defense that, by all means, was pretty
Dunze is
solid.
really good.
I mean, fantastic. And I mean, Texas did a good job of stopping up Dylan Johnson, who got a couple of touchdowns, but his yards per carry average was really low. It's been about a little over 5 yards to carry on the season. It was under 2.5 yards to carry in this
Hopefully
particular
he
game.
plays.
So
He had that injury.
hopefully he plays. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that's going to be something pretty significant as far as picking a winner in this one. I'm going to hold out hope that he does play though, because this seems like the type of situation where, uh, in an odd kind of way, yards per carry might not necessarily matter all that much against a team like Michigan, because Washington can move the ball between the 20s through the air pretty easily. Really, you're using your run game to kind of control the clock a little bit and just kind of get over the goal and get touchdowns in the red zone, those hard to get yards. But I'm going to go with Washington on this one. I've picked against them multiple times this season. I'm not going to do it again for the championship. I mean, that's probably going to be the game where they wet the bed in that
Of
scenario.
course.
But
Of
I'm
course.
going with a good storyline here. I'm going with a good quarterback, somebody who's had a
Very
really an
good quarterback.
incredible story, an incredible journey throughout his collegiate career. overcoming as much adversity as he has and finding some really good success here and likely going pro and being, like he'll be drafted, of course. I don't know necessarily how high he'll be drafted given age
Oh,
and
his
given considered
stock is
other things.
rising, and it might rise even more if he wins.
Like like I doubt he's going to be like a round one quarterback type of thing. Like I
He
don't know if
could
he's
be. Right now, they're saying round 2, Tom. If he wins
round.
the
Yeah,
national championship, he might slide in that round 1.
that sounds fair.
That
Like
that's
round
what
two
happened
sounds like
with
a good
Vince
spot
Young,
to grab him.
Tom. Vince Young was a round 2. Then he had that national championship game and got picked 3rd overall.
I don't think Penix is going to rise to that level, especially
Okay.
given some of the other quarterback options that we have. Like he could sneak into the first round to be absolutely sure. At the kind of like that tail end, teams might find value in getting that critical 5th-year option on a potential quarterback guy. But I kind of see him more as
The
like
New
kind of that
York
Hendon
Jets,
Hooker.
after Rodgers has his 1 season.
Yeah, maybe. No, I kind of see him as like that Hendon Hooker, really good toward the tail end of his college career, but because injury concerns is going to be a day two a quarterback. But yeah, I'm going with Washington. I'm taking points in this one. I want to see them challenge Michigan's defense in a way that Michigan hasn't really been challenged. I mean, I know, yes, Alabama has been a pretty good a team all season long, but this isn't the same level of offense that Washington is going to be providing. It's not the same level of offense that Georgia perhaps would have provided if Georgia were in this college football playoff, something that seems more and more vindicated, both with their win over Florida State and the way Michigan played Alabama in this final. The whole picking and choosing when we want to have a best team versus merit versus whatever you may have, but. That's why I think it's going to win the championship. I think it's going to be a really fun game to watch, and looking forward to the outcome on that one.
2 things real quick.
Go for it.
Penix, former Indiana guy, so he has some familiarity with Michigan. And secondly, a guy that used to run more often, hasn't run as much because of all the leg injuries. He did have a few runs in that CFP semi, so that's something to keep in mind. Is he going to use his legs? But still, again, for me, Michigan way too good on defense. I'm picking the Wolverines.
Another team way too good on defense, and they also have a quarterback who runs. The Buffalo Bills continue their tear. They are, as you said at the top of the show, a team that could be the 2nd seed in the AFC or find themselves completely out of the playoffs. They will be on Sunday Night Football against the Miami Dolphins, who have clinched a playoff spot, but there's a pretty big difference between having the 2nd seed, hosting a game in Miami, and having to go on the road in Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City against the Chiefs. So, Common, division title on the line for the AFC East. Who do you have in this matchup?
Yeah, this should be a great, great game. The Bills, by the way, have won 10 of 11 in this series, but a lot of the games, the last 2 years in particular, where Miami's really taken a step forward, have been really, really close. I know the game earlier this year was not close, but the games last year were. Miami is 7-1 at home. Bills only 3-4 on the road. The Bills are 3-point favorites, but it is kind of a couple teams going in a little bit opposite directions. The Bills have won 4 straight. The Dolphins just 2-2 in their last 4 games, clobbered against the Ravens last week. They have 1 win against a good team. A walk-off win against the Dallas Cowboys at home was their 1 close win against a good team. I'm going to lean Buffalo for a couple reasons. They did win the earlier matchup 48-20 this season. If these teams were both 100% healthy on a neutral field, I'd probably pick the Bills in Miami. I don't know what I would do, to be honest. But right now, Buffalo's playing a better brand of football, and they are considerably healthier. The Miami Dolphins will be without their great pass rusher, Bradley Chubb, and looks like without cornerback Xavier Howard, which are 2 of their very top defensive players. And these guys may play, but Raheem Mostert, we've got Devin Achane, I always pronounce his name wrong, and Jalen Waddle are all banged up. So whether they'll play, whether they won't play, how healthy are they, remains to be seen. I think Buffalo's playing a lot better football right now, given that Miami's banged up. I think Buffalo's going to win this game. I think they're going to get the AFC East crown. They're going to get the 2 seed, and they'll win the season with 5 straight wins, which is dangerous. But then again, can they go 9 straight or what is it, 8 straight, whatever they would need to get the Super Bowl ring, Tom? I don't know if they can because they've been very up and down. They were definitely up and down in that Charger game, but I think they have a healthier team and they have a little bit better roster. I mean, their defense, especially with Howard and Chubb out for Miami, I think is the big difference in this one because both of these teams have high-powered offenses. I do like Buffalo's defense more, but that is a Buffalo defense that has struggled against good offenses the last few years. So this is definitely not one that is a for sure thing, but I'll pick the Bills on the road to beat the Dolphins.
Yeah, I'll pick the Bills on the road as well because they've just been playing at a super high level ever since their bye week, ever since making the change at offensive coordinator. I mean, they their efficiency numbers and everything were really great with Ken Dorsey at coordinator, so it felt a little unfair. But
Joe
to see the way
Brady.
that the team has been playing with Joe Brady as the coordinator, and we're seeing Josh Allen the good side of the Superman role that he plays because I know that leads to a lot of turnovers, but I mean he's put up 42 touchdowns on the season, has been absolutely magnificent since that bye week. Something has flipped in Buffalo, and this is a team that absolutely went out and stomped Miami earlier in the season. I know a lot has changed between then and now, but like you said, with those injuries, having less depth at edge rusher, not being able to get after Josh Allen, just him having more time to make Superman type plays that he's capable of making. And then, like you said, outside of a close win against Dallas, Miami still hasn't overly proven themselves against really good teams. I mean, absolutely wet the bed against the Ravens last week in a
That was bad.
blowout. Like I didn't see it was a blow. I didn't see a
Yeah, we
blowout
both we
coming
both
from
had the
there.
Ravens winning, but I think we both thought it would be close.
Yeah, like and the Bills are pretty much like they're a pretty similar team to the Ravens in the sense that they've got a good defense to match a good offense. So I'm going to go with Buffalo as well in this one. They're going to cinch up that playoff spot. It's going to be a game. Hopefully, it is a close game that is worthy of the last regular season game of the year,
Yeah,
Sunday Night Football. Hopefully, it matches up to that hype. Certainly, last year, what was it? It was Detroit keeping Green Bay out of the
that
playoffs.
was
Like
awesome.
that was a worthy
Now the
Sunday
Bears
Night
could do the
Football
same
game,
thing this year too, Tom.
which we will be talking about potentially a little bit later on as we talk about the NFC. But certainly, as far as a standalone matchup. I'm going to pick the Bills. They're on a roll. I think they're going to beat Miami. I don't know if it's going to be steamrolling them because I think Jalen Waddle potentially is going to be back after injury.
I hope it's close, but there's something that tells me that Buffalo might steamroll them. To be honest, I really think that could happen. It's just a feeling the way things have
Yeah,
been going. I could see the Bills winning by 2 touchdowns in this game, Tom, because they seem to
that's a
really
lot.
wake up for the best teams. I know we talk about their inconsistencies,
Yeah,
but it seems like they're a team that plays up and down in their competition. Now, maybe not in the playoffs, but in the regular season, they've actually had Kansas City's number in the regular season. I mean, we saw what they did to Dallas. They completely blew them out. They have shown up for some of these, at least regular season, massive showdowns. I mean, even against Miami earlier this season, this one could actually get out of hand. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Miami won, but I also would not be surprised if Buffalo beat them by 2 touchdowns.
sure. Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. But that's certainly not the only significant playoff matchup. I mean, some of the ones that we're going to be touching on could have impacts on Buffalo maybe being able to backdoor their way into the playoffs. So certainly no by game time. Of course, you want to have home field advantage. You want to win the division. I mean, that's incentive in and of itself, but it is possible based on a couple of different scenarios. And I've got a playoff calculator pulled up coming. If you want to go over any hypotheticals, I can just punch them in really quickly
Sure.
for you there. But
The
I
Castleman
mean,
punch.
the next big matchup to really talk about is the rest of the AFC shaking out with 4 spots clinched, 3 remain, including the AFC South, where 3 teams are still in contention for that division. Not something I thought was going to be happening at the beginning of the season. I definitely thought that Indianapolis and Houston would not be in the conversation. I thought it'd be pretty clearly Jacksonville.
And that's how I was
Um,
looking for a lot of the season, too.
that's exactly, yeah. But the play from C.J. Stroud, even Gardner Minshew and the Colts, rallying from an Anthony Richardson shoulder injury that ended his season. They're going to be competing and putting the heat on Jacksonville. On Saturday, of course, we've got Pittsburgh going up against a Baltimore Ravens team that officially is going to be sitting Lamar Jackson for the game. But even if Pittsburgh wins, they still need some help to get into the playoffs based on how some other matchups go. So, Common, let's peer into your crystal ball here. What do you see happening? I've got my scenarios. I punched them in to the playoff calculator, so I can see what I think is going to have happen. But of course, if you have any questions, let me know. I will go ahead and make some switcheroos around to see what might shake out.
Here, I'm going to see if you can catch this reference. My girlfriend's going to be very, very proud of this. I'm going to have to tell her to watch this part of the show. Madame Zeroni is looking into her crystal ball. Do you know the reference?
I don't know that one, no.
Have you seen the movie Holes or read the book?
A long time ago.
Okay, see, this is what happens all the time. I've seen or read a book or a movie like once, like an old-time classic, and I always miss the references, and she gets furious at me over it. And I'm like, it's okay to not know every single pop culture reference.
Yeah.
So Madame Zeroni's the one that predicted what was going to happen and put a curse on the family, whatever. So, but she had a crystal ball in the movie. So there you go. So I'm going to start with, there is a lot of scenarios out there, but I'm going to start with the simple ones because maybe I'm making life easy on myself, but I'm going to simplify it.
Sure.
I'm going to give you the AFC South champion, and that will be the Jacksonville Jaguars because they got a simple scenario. To quote Ted Lasso, win and in. That's all they need. Now, Trevor Lawrence did practice today, Tom. I looked it up this morning right before the show. Trevor Lawrence did practice. There's some question marks. Is he going to start for Jacksonville, the quarterback? Obviously, he hasn't quite been the same in moments this year when he's been hurt. So if he plays, is he fully there? It's kind of tough to say. He's probably better than the backup. I actually think they might be able to win this game with the backup anyway. Now, Tennessee's going to play for Mike Vrabel. We'll see what happens with this job. Whether, whoever plays at quarterback, Will Levis, has a lot to prove as a young guy. Ryan Tannehill has a lot to prove as, look, am I still the guy in the NFL? Am I still an NFL quarterback? So I'm not saying Tennessee is going to lay down by any means, but Jacksonville was simply a better football team. They're better than Tennessee. They beat them 34-10 earlier this season. That's a lot of points, right? Like when you're talking about like you can make adjustments, 24 points is a lot of adjustments to, come up with. They've got the other Josh Allen, by the way, who I think is third in the league in sacks with 16, doing a great job on that Jacksonville defense. They've got, even with the injuries, they had some receiver injuries, but they still have Calvin Ridley, Travis Etienne. They got better playmakers. They got a better football team. I'm going to say with or without Trevor Lawrence, Jacksonville gets it done. They're 5-2 on the road, Tom. They like the road games better out there in Jacksonville. So that simplifies for me the AFC South. I think the Jags win and they're in. The wild card spots is where it gets really, really tricky. So the Dolphins are already in for a playoff spot. Because I'm picking the Bills in the division, Miami gets a wild card, and then it's going to go down to essentially three teams. I think the Steelers, the Texans, and the Colts.
Correct.
So the Steelers, for me, are in big, big trouble. I think they're going to win. Lamar Jackson is not playing. They already beat Baltimore with Lamar Jackson earlier this season. Mason Rudolph has rejuvenated the team. He's playing great at quarterback. The Steelers will win against a Baltimore team that doesn't play its best team, but that still won't be enough because they need either a Jacksonville loss or a Buffalo loss to go with their win as well to make the playoffs. You just heard me pick Buffalo. You heard me pick Jacksonville. The Pittsburgh Steelers are out. 10-win Pittsburgh Steelers not making the playoffs, and they only got themselves to blame because they lost to the Cardinals and the Patriots. Had they beaten one of those two teams, they would be in the playoffs. Simple as that. Tough for Pittsburgh. And then that leaves the last playoff spot, the last wild card spot, which it's interesting because it's a Saturday game. Houston and Indianapolis is playing on Saturday. It's a win and in game for both of those. Whoever wins is in, whoever loses is out. There's a lot of crazy scenarios with ties. You can get into it if you want. For my sake, I'm not going to. I'm just going to go ahead and assume that. I think there hasn't been a tie this year, by the way. So I'm just going to assume there won't be a tie in this game. I'm going to pick Houston to win at Indianapolis. I think, CJ Stroud, got banged up, had some injuries. They didn't play as good without him, and they didn't play as good with him his last game or two when he was hurt. But he seems to be doing better. I like Gardner Minshew a lot, not as much as CJ Stroud. This guy is a superstar in the NFL. He's a current star. He's going to be even a bigger star for years to come. Just a feeling with him in this big game. He's going to deliver. He's the best quarterback on the field, the best player maybe in this game altogether. So I expect the big game from CJ Stroud. Houston wins at the Colts. Houston makes the playoffs, which no one would have thought would happen before the season. And the Colts are outside looking in. So that means Bills get the East. Obviously, the Ravens already have the 1 seed in the AFC North. The 2 seed is Buffalo. 3 seed is the Chiefs in the AFC West. They'll be resting Patrick Mahomes, Mizzou Tiger, Blaine Gabbert getting the start this week in a meaningless game. Jacksonville gets the 4 seed only because of winning the division, not because of record. I think it's the Browns as the 5 right now.
They're locked in, yeah.
Locked into the 5. And then we have the 6 then would be Miami playing at Arrowhead Stadium. Tyreek Hill back at Arrowhead. Then the 7 is the Texans. And we could potentially have in round 2 Joe Flacco versus the Ravens making his return to Baltimore. Now on the NFC side, we can have Matthew Stafford making his return to Detroit. So we've got a lot of potential juicy matchups. Although Stafford is not starting this week against the Niners, neither is Brock Purdy. We have Sam Darnold and Carson Wentz in the talented but not so good quarterback matchup, Tom. A lot of great stuff week 18.
Yeah, on the AFC side of things, you and I have the same exact playoff matchup. I think
figured.
I think Jacksonville against Tennessee. I mean, it's always I'm not super duper confident in that one because with Mike Vrabel and the Titans, they kind of find a way to just kind of mess you up a little bit. I mean, I think Mike Vrabel is that good of a coach. I think that, I think if Tennessee wanted to move on from him, that would quite frankly be a mistake. I'd put him in the category with, like with John Harbaugh, with Mike Tomlin, of really good coach, regardless of background, just like a great head coach more than necessarily a pure offensive or pure defensive guy.
Leader of men.
Exactly. That big football cliche and everything. And yeah, CJ Stroud and the Texans, I feel like they're nice and healthy coming in with this one. They had a big game last week. Nico Collins had a phenomenal performance receiving the ball from CJ Stroud. They're in a pretty good rhythm. And I mean, if we're going to be talking about good coaches, Shane Steichen's been doing a fantastic job in Indianapolis as well. So that's another tough one, but I'm going to go with Houston as well. And unfortunately, Pittsburgh is going to be on the outside looking in for the playoffs. And then moving over to the NFC side, this is where there's a little bit more simplicity because basically we've got 2 spots that are up for grabs. We have the NFC South, where currently the Buccaneers on tiebreakers are in there. So basically, if they win the South. And then if they happen to lose to the Carolina Panthers, then the winner of the Saints and Falcons game takes the honors of winning that division. And then there's a couple different teams competing for that 7th seed, but Los Angeles is locked into a playoff spot. Philadelphia, Dallas, Detroit, and San Francisco all are. So, Common, how do you see the NFC side of things shaking out?
Yeah, so I'm not going to spend too much time analyzing this game. Obviously, it is any given Sunday. Anything can happen, but the Bucs are playing the Panthers, who have the worst record in the league. I'm just going to go ahead and assume and make a blank out of you and me. Maybe I'll butcher this, but I'm going to say Tampa beats the Panthers. They get the NFC South crown. That is pretty simple. NFC East is interesting because, for the longest time, we thought the Eagles would win the division. I think it's like, don't quote me on this. It's off the top of my head, but I think it's going to be 19 straight years with a different division champion because Dallas would win the division if they win this week, which I think they will win. And the Eagles will be a
Yeah.
wild card team, which, after they started 10-1, seemed crazy, but they've really, we talk about the Chiefs sliding. The Eagles have slid even more. So that has been tough for Philly there. We'll see what happens in the NFC East, who gets the wild card, who gets the division. But I think it's going to be Dallas getting the division. And then that means Detroit will get the 3 seed. They'll play the Rams, so it'll be that Stafford matchup. But as far as the last wild card spot, it's pretty darn simple in the NFC. Packers, Seahawks, Saints are all 8-8. The Vikings and Falcons are 7-9. They have outside chances, but I'm going to go ahead and eliminate them just because there's 3 8-8 teams. There's too much stuff that has to go right for Atlanta and Minnesota for them to get in the playoffs. So the Packers have the tiebreaker over Seattle, over New Orleans, and they play the Bears. Oh boy, Chicago's looking really good lately. Green Bay looked really good last week, though, after having a bad week against Carolina 2 weeks ago. They completely clobbered the Vikings. So at Lambeau Field, I'm a Bear fan. And what do we know? The Bears lose to Green Bay all the time, especially at Lambeau Field. I think the Packers beat the Bears and clinch that wild card spot. If they lose, it is likely Seattle who has the second tiebreaker. Seattle's playing the Cardinals. We know one thing about the Cardinals. They will not make it easy. That is for sure. But Seattle, in a must-win game, has a better team. I do like Seattle win that game. I also like the Saints to beat the Falcons. So I think all those 8-8 teams win. But Green Bay has the tiebreaker. Green Bay gets in, but there's a chance that Seattle gets in, I think, if they happen to have Green Bay lose. I'm not fully convinced Green Bay's beating the Bears. I'm not putting it in locks of the week. I'm not putting tons of confidence points in that game for my work thing we do with confidence points. But I'm going to go with the head, not the heart. I told you this about the NFL picks recent weeks. I was going too often with the heart in these toss-ups, and I said to myself, I'm going to start going with the head. I did that last week because, I'm a big Miami Dolphin guy. I went with the Ravens last week. I'm going with the Bills this week. And unfortunately, I'm going with the Packers over our hometown Chicago Bears. Big game for Justin Fields, though. He wants to stay in Chicago as the quarterback. Heck, he wants to be the guy somewhere else. He hasn't been in a playoff game. This is pretty much the biggest game for him in the eyes of Chicago fans because he has a chance to knock out the rival Green Bay Packers. Now, I said this to you, I don't know if it was off air or on air, but this is a game that, one game probably shouldn't matter that much, but this is probably the most important game of Justin Fields' career. As a Bears fan, I'm greatly anticipating to see just how he does against Green Bay.
Yeah, well, as you might imagine with the sweater, with the apparel that I am wearing this week,
of course,
that I am going to go with the Bears. I am going to be putting them in locks of the week later in the show. I think that the Seattle Seahawks are going to be getting that last wild card spot because they have a pretty favorable matchup against an Arizona Cardinal team that, upset the Philadelphia Eagles last week. So we could be in a scenario where we are seeing the Saints, perhaps, as that final wild card team.
Two NFC South playoff teams. That would be wild.
There is a chance, there is a possibility that the Packers lose this game to the Bears and still make it into the playoffs. As I'm clicking around here, if the Cardinals beat the Seahawks and the Falcons beat the Saints and the Panthers beat the Buccaneers, Green Bay loses, they still get into the playoff on tiebreakers. It's a ton of ifs. I don't think that's very likely to happen, but Pete Carroll has been, he's a phenomenal coach. He's going to have his guys ready to go against Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals. Although the one weakness for the Seattle Seahawks, you look at their record, their in-division record has not been outstanding, but that's pretty much a testament to just how good their division is with the Rams, the 49ers in there. But I'm going to have the Seattle Seahawks winning over the Cardinals, taking that last spot. Like you said, the Buccaneers, that's a fairly simple one. The Panthers at this point uh, have little to play for. I mean, they're locked into a 1 seed that they will not be getting. They're locked into the first pick of the second round that they will have this season for improving their team. But they're not playing for their head coach because he got fired in the middle of the season. This is a team that, for the moment, is fairly rudderless. Um, It'll be interesting to see what their attendance level is because remember, there's that game earlier in the season. I believe Jacksonville was in town, and it didn't really look like there was anybody even there at the stadium.
Sure.
If you had a couple of quarters to rub together, you could get yourself into a Carolina Panthers game. Not sure if that'll be the case. I'm sure Tampa Bay fans will be making the trip up the coast to cheer on their team to win the division, but I
Big
think that
show.
I think that Tampa Bay has enough to play for that they're going to absolutely just come out and stomp the Panthers and just kind of end their season on a low note. So that's how I see it shaking out. I'm going with the Bears in a big way because I am, as of right now, a believer of the streak that they're on and a believer on how the team is talking their business and looking at
That's
how
what
they're
happens.
approaching Green
Right
Bay.
when they give you hope, they crush you, Tom.
I
The
don't know. I think
Bears
these guys
way.
are good enough that it could be a little bit different. I mean, I love the Justin Fields line of yeah, the fans are going to be loud. Outside of watching football, there's not much to do in Green Bay. It's the closest thing to the Joakim Noah comment about Cleveland that the
Right?
city has seen. And I mean, I'm going to like Justin Fields, whether he's a Bear next year, whether he's a
Sure.
Bear in 2 years, whether he's playing for somebody else, wherever Justin Fields is playing as quarterback in his NFL career they can count me as one of their supporters and one of their fans. I just really like the guy a lot. So that's how I see the
Yeah.
AFC or the NFC rather shaking out for getting the South in that last spot. So it's going to be really intriguing. Couple games on Saturday, a bunch of games split up nice and even on Sunday. Maybe NFL should take note and instead of having games shifted where there's like 10 at noon and like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, have a little bit more balance to the schedule. You get a lot more eyeballs, a lot more intrigue on your product. Just my humble opinion.
Agreed.
But now let's move to our locks of the week, where we ended the year on a high note. How about that?
Yes. How about that, Mr. Pessimistic Castleman? Just real quick, Tom,
I mean, we're
that's a
still under
little
500
smart
as a
remark
show.
for Justin Fields, by the way, to kind of like give that, like, win over the fans a little bit more.
Yeah.
That was probably kind of calculated on his part. I'll say that. Definitely worked with you. He got you, Tom. Got him.
He already had me.
Okay, that's fair. I'm team hashtag Caleb Williams, but I know we'll talk about that in weeks to come. That could be a whole 2-hour show in its
Yeah.
own right. As for betting locks of the week, that is correct. We both went over 500 the last week of the 2023 slate. I was 2-1. I had Mizzou plus 3.5 against Ohio State. Mizzou winning outright 14-3. I had money on Mizzou money line as well. Obviously, Ohio State without their star receiver. Mizzou just, it seemed like they cared more in the fourth quarter. They were very fortunate. Ohio State's quarterback got hurt as well. But you know what? We'll take it. Tigers win the Cotton Bowl. Massive, massive win for Mizzou. I had Joe Flacco over 234.5 pass yards versus the Jets. He hit that total in the first half, Tom Castleman. Finished with a cool 309 pass yards for the game. Barely even passed the ball the second half. He was like right at that 300 mark in the first half. I don't remember if it was just over or just under, but I know he hit the 234.5 in the second quarter in that game. So that was one I didn't have to sweat. And then lastly, I probably shouldn't have made this one because we had a lot of garbage time passing yards with the Jets down big and the Browns just letting them get pass yards. I had Trevor Siemian under 176.5. He did get 261. I think around halftime, he was, pretty close, maybe not on pace to get it. A lot of the passing yards came in the second half in garbage time, but that's what happens when you bet player props. You never know what's going to happen and what the scenarios are. Either way, 2-1, pretty happy week. You and I both had Mizzou, the alma mater, plus 3.5 against Ohio State. You got that one right. Mizzou winning 14-3. Here's one you didn't have to sweat either, Tom. Cardinals, Eagles over 48 points. Cardinals winning 35-31, 66 points, well over the total in what has quite frankly become a horrific Philadelphia Eagle defense. There's a lot of talk about the Kansas City Chief receivers and all their drops. That is a big, big problem. The Kansas City receivers are actually better than the Eagles secondary, which has been the most disappointing team, the most disappointing part of the football. I know they've had some injuries, but they have way too much talent to be doing what they're doing out there in Philadelphia. They probably missed their defensive coordinator, looks like, perhaps. Then you lastly had the Rams minus 5.5 over the Giants. I actually tailed you on this pick on the betting front, and they look good at one point. They're up double digits.
Yeah.
But the Rams could not close on the cover. They
Both on the
sort of
win.
closed on the win, although not really, because they should have lost. But there was the 2-point play was thrown way behind Saquon Barkley. Tyrod Taylor, who, by the way, is the best Giants quarterback on their roster, but he's still bad. He's just less bad than Daniel Jones and Tommy DeVito. Saquon was wide open for the 2-point play, Tom. He throws it behind him. The Giants lose by 1, but they do cover. So there you go. What do you have? Anything? Yeah, I have a really good one actually this week.
I mean, I feel like all mine are pretty good because I feel like, so for example, the first one I'm going to go with is the Bills -3. I mean, both the Bills and the Dolphins have incentive to win, but Bills have a little bit more incentive, as if they lose, they're not in the playoffs, whereas Miami's in no matter what. This could be the type of situation where if the Bills end up going up by a fairly significant margin, that maybe Miami makes the decision. Let's make sure that Tua stays healthy. Let's make sure that Tyreek and Jalen stay healthy. Let's get ready for Kansas City next week. Not saying that that's a super likely outcome or anything along those lines, but Bills -3, I like that one. I also like the Buccaneers -4.5 in Carolina.
Don't mess
Again,
around.
Carolina has anything to really play for in this one. Not even really like the pride of knocking out a division rival. I think the Buccaneers are going to be highly motivated in this one. I mean, Antoine Winfield Jr., the safety who got snubbed from the Pro Bowl, Buda Baker going instead of him, despite having no interceptions, fumbles, sacks, recoveries, anything like that. I think the Buccaneers are going to be all fired up to go out and win this division, make sure that because I think they lose the tiebreakers. I don't think that they have a wild card backdoor the way that the Saints do, for example, of being able to get in that wild card spot. So Buccaneers -4.5. And then, like I said, I like the Bears to win outright against the Packers. I think they are relishing the opportunity. They're playing much better now than they have been earlier on in the season. And in fact, I mean, this is a Bears team where it really, really stings, where they have that big lead that you lost to the Broncos. You had
Browns.
the Browns game. You had a game in Detroit where if you convert on a pick six for Jalen Johnson, or even if it's just an interception, it doesn't go for a touchdown. Later on in that drive, a touchdown was scored. I mean, we're talking about a Bears team that could very well be in the playoffs with the way that they have played toward the tail end of the season. And they have all sorts of reasons to be fired up. I mean, none of them like Green Bay. Justin Fields is playing for perhaps his career in Chicago, but certainly his career in the NFL, period. He's going to be a starter. It's just a matter of where is he going to be a starter. But he's been playing at a really high level. And I just like the idea of the Bears knocking out Green Bay the second year in a row, where on the last week of the season, the Packers fall short of the playoffs. So give me the Bears +3 on the road as well.
All right. I got 3, and I'm going with teams that need, big wins to make the playoffs or stay alive in playoff contention. I'm going to tell you, starting with the Bills -3 against the Dolphins. Buffalo has won 10 of 11 head-to-head against Miami. They clobbered them earlier this season. Buffalo's won 4 straight. Miami's just 2-2 in its last 4 games. No Bradley Chubb at the edge rusher position. No Xavier Howard at the corner spot. Both running backs and Jalen Waddle are banged up, may or may not play. Buffalo's healthier. Buffalo's better right now. They're better on defense, and they're just as good on offense. Josh Allen's playing great ball. The new OC Now, like you said, yeah, if Buffalo does get up, 10 points, maybe Miami calls off the dogs. Maybe they don't, but 3 points is not a big spread. I think Buffalo can win by more than 3. Give me the Bills -3 at the moment struggling Dolphins. So this one right here is interesting because you and I both picked Pittsburgh to miss the playoffs. I know I'm picking them outright to win the game. I think you might be as well without Lamar Jackson. But that is the first NFL game that kicks off this weekend, Saturday afternoon. So they won't know what happens in the Buffalo game, in the Jacksonville game. Pittsburgh has everything to play for in this game. Baltimore has nothing to play for. They've got the 1 seed already clinched in the AFC. I mean, I guess they're playing for beating their rival, which is something. But Lamar Jackson's not going to be playing. No, I guess Pro Bowler Tyrod Huntley's going to be playing, but that's not going to help him in that one. I like the Steelers -3.5. They actually already beat Baltimore with Lamar earlier this season. Pittsburgh always plays the Ravens tough. They have a pretty good record against them. I like the Steelers -3.5. Mason Rudolph has been really, really good as Pittsburgh's quarterback. This will probably be a really low-scoring game, but I do like the Steelers. More of their starters playing, more to play for. A must-win game to win -3.5. And then, Tom, lastly, I'm sticking with the playoff theme, teams that need to win to get in. I'm going to go Texans -1.5 over the Colts, a virtual pick 'em. I know 2 points. I mean, knowing my luck, Texans win by 1, which has already happened this year, by the way. A previous bet that I had Texans -1.5. I think they won by 1, or maybe it was -2.5 and they won by 2. So I'm a little worried there, but I think, that's pretty much a pick 'em there. I think that the two teams are close, but I think CJ Stroud is the best player on the field, the best quarterback. A game on the line, a season on the line. Do you want CJ Stroud or Gardner Minshew leading you? I want CJ Stroud. They're getting healthier. Collins is the good wide receiver. Give me Houston -1.5 over the Colts.
All right,
That
sounds
game
good.
also on Saturday, by the way, too, Tom.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree on all of those. I mean, the one that might be a little bit tight is that Pittsburgh one, just because Lamar's sitting, but they're still going to be pounding the ball away on defense. I don't know.
Well,
That'll be a
how
close
many of
one.
the defensive guys are going to sit too, though? I know they haven't released the
Possibly,
full
yeah.
lineup, but
Right.
I have a feeling that some of those guys might play, maybe a quarter, maybe 2. When it gets down to the fourth quarter, it's going to be a tight game. Pittsburgh is going to have their whole team in there, and Baltimore probably will not.
Well, and that's the one where it also kind of depends a little bit on is Baltimore going to care about, hey, let's just bury the Steelers, bury a
Yeah,
division
that's
rival, keep them
true.
out. That'll be interesting. That'll be interesting to see. Certainly some intrigue there. But yeah, I like pretty much all those picks. So definitely will be an exciting game or exciting slate of games for the wild card, or not wild card weekend, but the last week of the regular season. Moving on to trivia, I've got one for you, Common. So with the Carolina Panthers losing last week, they have secured the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft, one that they certainly have had before when they drafted Cam Newton, for example. But in the entire history of the NFL and with the NFL draft, there have been 3 teams that have never, ever, ever, ever held the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Can you name those 3 teams?
3 teams, never number 1 overall pick. So what year did the draft start? Like, are we saying like the current era or all time, I guess?
Current era, because yeah, let me pull up when
Well, I'm going to start with 1, the Green Bay Packers, Tom.
the Green Bay Packers are incorrect. They have had the number 1 pick at some point. 1936 is when the draft began, by the way.
Oh, okay. So this is the history of the NFL. Okay, so I think the Steelers drafted Bradshaw number 1, if I remember correctly, Tom. Is that right?
Correct? Yep.
So the Steelers obviously are not the answer. 3 teams that have never had the 1 overall pick. I mean, the Cowboys drafted Aikman. It's not them. It's got to be teams that are always good. maybe someone's always bad, but not bad enough. All right, I'm gonna reason this out by divisions. All right, so let's see here. Obviously, the Bears have the Bears had the one pick. Gosh, I can't remember them having. I'm sure they have.
Yes, they have had the number one. Well, they had the number one pick last year.
Oh yeah, they did. You're right. But
Yeah,
they traded it. Okay,
correct.
so not the Bears, not the Packers. The Lions have definitely had the one pick. um, so Minnesota's had to have had the one pick at some
They
point.
have.
Yeah. Okay. They were bad. It's not them. They were bad as well. They were bad. They were bad. Okay. I'm talking to myself by divisions. The 49ers, Tom.
The 49ers have had the number one overall pick. Let me see, I'm like scrolling through. They had Alex Smith in '05, I believe. He was the
Oh, you're
last
right.
number
Yeah,
one pick
no, that's
they
my
had.
bad. That's my bad. Um, you know, I'm just going in my head by conferences, divisions. I know the Jets took Keyshawn Johnson. The
Mhm.
Patriots took Bledsoe.
Yep.
Um, no. I'm kind of going a rundown of teams in my head. Have the Ravens had the number one overall pick before?
The Ravens are
Have
one of the
not.
three teams that have never had the
Yep.
number one
So
overall
yeah,
pick in the
Ravens
NFL
is one of
draft.
them.
Yep.
Yep. Um, is it a lot of the AFC teams, Tom?
Um, Two of them were AFC. Obviously, you got one with the Ravens, so now it's split.
Okay.
There's one AFC and one NFC team.
Okay. Never had the number one pick. AFC. No, he was number one. That they've definitely had the number one overall pick. No, they took him. Okay. Um, and it's not the Steelers, huh?
Not the Steelers.
Not the Steelers. Is it the Chiefs?
Nope, they've had the number one pick. I don't think recently, but they have had the number one pick before.
Okay. The Broncos took Elway, so it's not the Broncos, right? Although they got him in a trade, so Denver.
Yes, the Baltimore
Denver.
Colts took John Elway. That's part of
Yes.
the tricky part of the question, but the Broncos
Yes.
themselves as a team have never had the number one
Okay,
overall
so
pick. So you've got one
Broncos.
team in the NFC left to go on this
One
one.
team on the NFC. All right.
Yep,
So I know it's not anyone in the North or the South, right?
correct.
So that leaves the NFC East. So let's see. Dallas, I know had Aikman. Trying to think in recent memory. Well, the Giants had Eli was a trade thing, but they had is it the Giants, Tom?
It is not the Giants. They had the
Not the
number one pick.
Giants.
Let's see. Well, right now I'm on 1965. They had the number one pick, but I'm sure they had the pick more recently than that.
Okay, so it's not the Giants. I don't think it's Washington.
It is not
Or
Washington. They've
it's
had the
not
number one pick.
Washington. Um no, didn't Philadelphia take Carson Wentz? Or was he the two pick?
He was the two pick that year, but is not the Eagles.
Yeah, I didn't think it was the Eagles either because they've had enough bad years. So that leaves the NFC West, Tom.
Yes, it
I
does.
already guessed the Niners. I mean, I guess the so that's Rams. Is it Seattle?
Seattle also has never held the number one pick in the
Yeah.
NFL draft. So
Okay.
those are the three teams: Seahawks, Ravens, Broncos.
It's a little surprising if you think of like I would have thought like Steelers Packers would be Steelers Packers would be two of them. Tom is a
Well,
little bit
given
surprising.
like the Ravens, well, they were moved from
Oh, get Baltimore, right? Or no?
Cleveland to Baltimore, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, but like the Seahawks are a relatively new-ish franchise. And then the Broncos, they traded for Elway for that number one pick, and certainly didn't need much help from him after that.
Interesting. All right, Tom, I got a good one for you.
Go for it.
8 tight ends have had 100 catches in a single, 100 or more catches in a single season. Can you name the 8 tight ends?
All right, so Kelsey,
Yep.
Tony Gonzalez,
Yep.
Antonio Gates,
Not Antonio Gates. That's the one that I knew you would guess. He's actually never got to 100.
Jason Witten,
Jason Witten. That's another one I knew you would get right.
Jeremy Shockey.
Not Jeremy Shockey.
Ooh, not the Giants. Okay. Rob Gronkowski.
Not Gronk. That's another shocker.
Wow.
Never 100 catches in a season.
Kellen Winslow Sr.
Not the Mizzou legend, Kellen Winslow Sr., although he did lead the league in catches twice, but never had 100.
Let's see. I'm going to guess. I feel like a rookie had to have done it, so I'm going to guess Sam Laporta this year.
No, but you're getting very, very warm.
Very warm.
Like, warm as in there's a lot of active guys, and a guy that did do it this season. He's not a rookie, I don't think, but he's a younger guy. That's why I say you're warm. Because one of the 8 got it this year.
TJ Hawkinson, no. George Kittle, no. He's not really young.
He's got a big game this week. He's not that young, actually. He's a little bit older than I thought.
Yeah.
But he's not.
Wouldn't be Kyle Pitts now, would it?
Not Kyle Pitts.
Throwing the ball nearly enough.
This guy's got a very, very big game this weekend. Very, very big game.
Big game this weekend. Tight end.
Sort of a win and in type game.
Evan Engram?
Evan Engram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's one of those move tight ends or U tight ends that I don't really think of.
I know. He's kind of like a wide receiver-ish.
Yeah. So wait, how many have I got? I've gotten 5?
No, you got only 4.
Okay.
So
tight
you're
ends.
missing 4 more.
100 catches for tight ends.
You got some active guys. You're actually missing the single season leader for catches in a tight end, which you never guess. I knew it myself because we pulled him in our break room at work. But the guy that actually has the most catches in a single season for a tight end, who, again, most people would never think is the answer, is one of the guys you're missing. 116 catches. To this day, still the record.
This should actually think like older guys like Jay Novacek.
No, that's
Dallas Cowboys,
Cowboy
Mike
legend.
Ditka, Ozzie Newsome. They didn't throw the ball nearly
definitely
enough back
not
then.
an older guy.
So it would be not
an
Witten,
active
not
player.
Active
player.
Mark Andrews?
Andrews is one of them, but that's not the record. Not the
record.
So that is one of them. And you have 2 more active ones and then one guy that is not active.
So we said not Kittle, not Hawkinson.
And this guy is a 3-time Pro Bowler, but not necessarily recently in the Pro Bowl. He's probably having the worst season of his career right now, but a lot of that is because of injuries. So career low in receiving yards this year. You're very warm with that one.
Zach Ertz.
116 catches, the most in a single season, Tom.
Wow.
That's a lot of catches.
Heck of a find in fantasy football if you happen to grab him.
Right. And then there's 2 more. One of them is active. He recently switched teams. He's dealt with some injuries, but had a really, really good season a couple years ago, which would have been his 100-catch season. Because I think it was 2 years ago. If not, I think it was 2 years ago.
Huh.
He's on a new team this year.
New team this year. It was really good.
No, it was in 2020, actually, that he had his 100-catch season. But brand new team this year. So he played on a different team in 2022.
Oh, so Darren Waller, there we go. Because he's been injured this year. I hadn't even thought about him.
Yes. And then the old school guy is one of my favorite tight ends as a kid. Part of one of my favorite offenses ever.
So that would be no, not the Rams,
Not who?
not the Rams,
Nope.
because they didn't really have a good tight end. Mike Martz
My
didn't believe in tight ends.
my other favorite tight end, or my other favorite offense of that era. Like when you think of the early 2000s, you think of two really offensive prowess teams. You know, probably the best offense after the greatest show on turf, like after they got done playing.
Already said Tony Gonzalez in Kansas City, and they were really good on offense. Oh, so Dallas Clark and the Colts. There we go. I had to
Yes.
get there adjacently.
My other clue was an Iowa Hawkeye tight end, not named Hawkinson and Kittle.
Yeah,
So they have actually, or Laporta actually. They have for all the bad offense they have a nice little tight end tradition,
great tight ends.
which makes sense. They do the little short throw. It's all they can do, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
there you go. All right, what do you got for statement of the week, Tom?
All right. So for statement of the week, this is kind of a semantical thing, but I want to take the college football playoff and make that completely and totally separate from the bowl game systems that we have going on, the bowl game structure that we have going on, because I think there's still a lot of charm to be had in the bowl games. So, for example, yes, Michigan won the Rose Bowl over the Alabama Crimson Tide, but that's traditionally like a Big Ten, Pac-12 game, and I know with conference realignment, it doesn't really matter as much. But if Michigan loses to the Washington Huskies in the championship game, nobody's going to remember this team as the Rose Bowl champion or the winner of the Rose Bowl game. That's why I think we have to have them as separate entities altogether, have a college football playoff that is unto itself, and have a bowl game structure set up for all the teams that didn't make the playoffs. I think that gives a lot more importance and restore some of the novelty to the bowl game structure, to the New Year's Six games, where you have, for example, Sugar Bowl is the top SEC team and top Big 12 team that aren't in a college football playoff or in the BCS championship game. Rose Bowl, like I said, traditionally Pac 12 and Big 10, again, with realignment, this is going to have to be a bit different. But if the Pac 12 does add some teams, does continue on as a admittedly diminished conference, I mean, they'd still be going up against like the third or fourth best Big Ten team, quite frankly, with the college football playoff being as expanded as it is. So there could still be some charm there for that. I mean, with the Orange Bowl, you have the ACC team against like Notre Dame or one of the top, Big 12 or SEC teams that haven't already been picked for another bowl. So basically, what I'm saying is, I think that the bowl structure can still be used to create compelling, interesting games to watch. And by the way, I wouldn't hate it if we pushed back the whole transfer portal and recruitment deadline so that coaches and players are still invested in these games. Of course, I think having a monetary compensation, now that we have name, image, and likeness, is also going to be important for keeping players engaged in these games. I think that for the most part, they're silly. I mean, look at the fire that we had for the Pop-Tart Bowl game. More people remember the Pop-Tart mascot getting eaten than they remember the
Or
actual
the
outcome of the
Mayo
game.
throwing. I love the
The
Duke
Mayo
Mayo
throwing.
Bowl.
I don't even really remember who played in those games, but those are the moments that I remember. That's, I mean, really what the sponsorship is all about. But we can still have a really nice college football bowl season separate from the college football playoff. I think that there's still a way to kind of have a little bit of the old to go with the new. There's no going back from the money that comes with the college football playoff. But I still think that there is some value to what the bowl system provides. It'd be nice if the NCAA, if the college football playoff committee could acknowledge that, could try to come up with a little bit more of a creative solution here to keep things more engaging instead of using these bowl games as mere stepping stones to a championship, which I already think is a contrived notion when we're looking at something as broad as collegiate sports. It's not like the NFL where there's only 32 teams, and you feel pretty good about the fact that everybody more or less round robins and that the playoffs are a true indicator of a true champion. I mean, March Madness is already a gimmick. I mean, we call it the national champion, even though that's the worst way to determine the actual best team for a college basketball season. I think we can separate these two things and still have really worthwhile, meaningful games going forward.
I have something sort of similar on the theme of the college season.
Hmm?
Uh, my only devil's advocate to yours before I
Sure.
get into mine would be that you think of the Rose Bowl, you think of the Orange Bowl, these big bowl games, you think of the best, top teams in the country playing. And then if you have, the 12 teams in the playoff, then all of a sudden your Rose Bowl matchup is like Iowa against, I guess Pac-12 is not a team, but I'm just going to just throw a team out there, Cal or something random like that,
Yeah.
like you don't really have your powerhouse, I guess. I
I
mean, how
mean,
much does that matter? I don't know, but
exactly.
that's my one like devil's advocate.
Yeah,
But I
like
mean,
with the playoff, I mean, obviously it doesn't really work this year, but if like let's see, like I'm looking at the matchups, like I know that they played the Cotton Bowl, Missouri and Ohio State, like that was still pretty significant. Like that's the sort of thing where I'm talking about in terms of having some of the top teams going up. Like if we had
yeah, but
say,
those would have been in the CFP though.
well, in the new one, yeah, but
Yeah,
I mean that's why
the new one.
that's why this whole thing is so messy. But I think that like kind of separating those two things, it still keeps some impact, some significance more than just oh, it's a disappointing season because we didn't win the college football championship. It's like well, you still won the Rose Bowl. Like that should still mean something. It's just not going to now that we have this system in place, or it hasn't meant that since we had this new system in place.
Yeah. My statement is that we need to fix these players opting out. And at this point, I'm at the stage of where we got to do whatever it takes. So the first thing we got to do is push back the transfer portal, Tom. That thing is obvious. We got to push it back a few months. So what? The kids get a little bit less time to get into your team system. There's spring camp, Tom. There's also fall camp. There's a lot of time. Like if we push back spring camp, you can still have spring camp and have fall camp. These teams start playing in February, in March to get in together. If they start going in April and May, then take a little bit of break and then start again in, August and September. It's not like they're not going to have any camaraderie together as a team because that's really what kind of pushes the transfer portal because these guys are hurrying to get to their new team because, the recruiting window was closing, this and that. Let's just push the whole thing back. Yes, a team may end up having a little bit less time together, maybe a little bit later on, but something's got to give. You're still going to have your entire fall camp. You're still going to have a lot of time together. Maybe you increase the amount of days you're allowed to practice, something like that. I don't know because I know there's tight restrictions around that. But I think that we got to have the best players in these bowl games. And that's not going to happen unless we get rid of this transfer portal. The NLI, or however you say it, is also
NIL,
causing
yeah.
some issues with this. I think there has to be some greater incentive in these games. And I've been thinking and I'm struggling to come up with the best solution. One thing that I did think of is potentially monetary value. Like if you win the bowl game, your kids get money for it. Maybe
Yeah.
it's something fun. Like, I mean, I know it doesn't sound like anything great, but like, a year's supply of Pop-Tarts or mayo. I know that's probably not enough, but maybe something to go with that and money and make this kind of a little bit more fun as well. The other thought that I have, this one is very, very radical, Tom, but this would lead to a lot of change. So I'm going to get radical
I'm
with you.
intrigued.
Very intriguing. For future playoff seeding, you look at how the team, not the current team, your team has done historically in bowl games in the last 10 years. So if your team has more bowl records, if you're sitting there thinking, who do we put in, Florida State or Michigan? I'm just throwing it out there, random throw out. And if you're sitting there, you're like, oh, these teams are so close. Which one of these teams has more bowl wins in the last 10 years? Which team has more Power 5 bowl wins? That way you make the programs really, really care. I'm talking about like as sort of like a tiebreaker situation. If one team is clearly better than the
But the
other,
players
you
are
put them
gone.
in.
That requires the players to want to have some sort of like alumni pride or something like that.
Yes, and they
And
do. Some of these guys do.
some of them do, but for
Maybe it's
others, it
going to
might be
require
that's
a
not
little bit
nearly
more
enough.
pride. Something that like incentivizes you to play in that game for your program historically. maybe this is it, and maybe this is a one time that's a little bit different season to season. Maybe for every 5 years, the college football programs with the most bowl wins get extra money to their school. There's one for you. And maybe you have your quality of bowls ranked and you get 2 points for a BCS bowl, 1 point from the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. And maybe some of these lower schools, get some funding as well. Something that really makes you want to win a specific bowl game, because 27 Florida State and 27 Georgia kids not playing in that game is bad. That's my other statement, by the way. Florida State, get out of here. They didn't deserve to make it. They lost 63-3, and that they had no pride in their program. And those are the type of kids, that mentality, because some of these opt-outs and transfers and injuries, 27 of those kids that sat out, Tom, are not going to the NFL. Now, 27 of them might think they're going, but in reality, very few of those 27 are going to the NFL. And it's having that personal pride to play in a big bowl game, which is even more the reason why Florida State did not deserve to be in this game. I don't feel bad for them one bit. Georgia had 27 guys out as well, and they came in with the mentality, we're going to pound you guys 63-3. But we got to fix this bowl system. We got to have these top kids playing in these top games. We got to give them extra incentive. I know we have the whole thing of like, well, do you want to risk your future for injuries? We saw it this year with Joe Burrow. Yes, the likelihood is smaller, but Joe Burrow got hurt in practice. Travis Kelce this year, Tom, got hurt in practice. He's had that nagging injury. Put away these Taylor Swift people saying they're losing because of T Swift. They're losing because of the receiver drops. For Travis Kelce has not been the same guy, and that's because he's been injured. That injury happened in practice, Tom. So you can get hurt at any point. Mm-hmm. Let these kids play these games. Let's see the best kids in all these games. Let's not have any of this, we're not going to play in this game scenario. So whether that's monetary value going straight to the programs for years to come, whether that's monetary value to the players, we can do that. Push back the transfer portal, push back the recruiting period, because even for me as like a bettor, even for us doing that Capital One Bowl Mania thing, it becomes very hard to track who's playing and who's not. And I don't want to be going into the bowl season thinking to myself, is like, well, do I have to spend this time to figure out, if you're looking up cumulative stats, how many guys are out for this team? And there's 30-something bowl games, 40 bowl games, whatever it is. And I have to figure out in each one who's playing, who's not. That's just a headache for me, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm a proponent of Occam's razor. The simplest solution is the most Occam's razor. It's a philosophical razor. The simplest solution is the most likely one, and the simplest solution is simply pay the players more money. You want to throw in a box of Pop-Tarts, a jar of mayo, some Cheez-Its, what have you. For some of these other bowls, you want some free car insurance, knock your socks off. But really, like, giving that money to the players, having a pool available for them, because like you said, most of them are not going to be playing in the NFL. And if they can pick up, say, $5,000, $10,000, whatever that number might be for playing in a bowl game, potentially winning, maybe that's the difference. You win, you get 10, you lose, you get 5, something along those lines. That's going to keep those more marginal players invested in coming back, in playing for that bowl game. And yeah, I completely agree also with pushing back transfer portal. I mean, that's going to decrease the amount of velocity of players moving from program to program, keep them invested in the one that they have. I mean, and that actually might not even necessarily have to be the case if we simply say pay the players. Because if you're a Kyle McCord, because he's one of the highest profile transfers, if it's like, hey, buddy, you got a shot at 10 grand if you want to hold off on throwing your name into the portal until after the Cotton Bowl, that's something that definitely would appeal to me if I were 18, 19, 20, 21 years old and could throw a football real good. That's definitely something where I'd say, sure, yeah, sure. I may have other NIL money coming in at that point if I'm that level, if I'm that caliber of talent. I mean, it wouldn't work necessarily for the Caleb Williams, Drake Mays, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s where you're a bona fide NFL prospect. But for like a
And
Common
that's
Core,
where it
like
gets
that's
tricky because do we have a solution? Because like those guys, and those are the guys we most want to see. So like,
but I'm
is
also
there a
fine with
solution?
them
I don't
not
know,
playing.
Tom.
I mean, for a while it used to like be just like the highest profile guys. Like it used to be like the Jadeveon Clowney
I
type
remember
of players
Leonard
where it's
Fournette.
yeah, like if you are
But that's the 12
top
team CFP though.
15
That
type
is
of
going to
thing.
help that a lot because a lot of these guys from the big name schools, the 12 team CFP or well, yeah,
Yeah,
it's college football playoff. That is going to help that some.
that
But I
will
don't know
help
if it's
some.
ever going to.
I think money just straight to the players is also the simplest solution for also helping. I agree with you on that. Like I think that's going to be another big way. So there. I mean, college football playoff. We're doing this show for pretty much free. That seems to be your favorite type of product is stuff that you get for free. Take our advice and make your solutions better.
Right.
Salute your sports
That's where
for
we've
100
come to the
episodes.
point where you know how I am about paying college athletes. I've never been the biggest proponent of it, but
Yeah,
that's how far this bowl system has come that I'm here sitting, let's pay the athletes, Tom. That's how
exactly.
bad this has gotten with all these guys not playing, in these bowl games. I mean, 27 Georgia Bulldogs and 27 Florida State Seminole. We're talking about half the teams out for these
Like a third.
guys. Yeah,
There's
but
like 100 kids on each team, but yeah, I
yeah,
the point still stands.
but
Absolutely.
yes, we're talking close to half the players out.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So anyway, great show. Next week we're gonna have. It's kind of like if you like the championship game, that's the great thing. But obviously for me, a World Cup, Olympics, those are my sports, but they're once every 4 years. Arguably, Tom, the sheer two best weekends of sports. We're talking about just the overall depth and consistent greatness. For me, the two best weekends in sports we see are the opening week of the March Madness college basketball tournament and NFL wildcard weekend because there is so much crazy
Uh-huh.
games this year, especially with how evenly matched the NFL is. So next week we'll preview the NFL wildcard weekend, which I think is, along with March Madness, one of the two best weekends of sports in a given year, Tom. So I'm
Yeah,
pumped
we're
for
gonna
that.
go like are we gonna go fairly in depth matchup by matchup, I'm assuming? That's
Probably,
probably
right?
gonna be the whole show. Like we could do a little bit of college football recap if we want to, but I think for the most
Yeah.
part, that's where we're gonna get, into the meat and potato of things.
Yeah,
I
that's
might
going to
not
be
even
fun.
research like for a trivia or anything like that, because I think that's gonna be a pretty hefty program.
It's going to be fun. I mean, actually, Tom, we can have, Chiefs and Dolphins, Tyreek against Kansas City.
Uh-huh.
Matthew Stafford could be back in Detroit. We could have, so many potential juicy matchups. It's going to be so much fun. And again, I think there's not a single team that stands out in the NFL. I know people want to label the Ravens. I'm still not fully sold on them either, personally. So it's going to be just an incredible, playoff weekend to look forward to. So I am super pumped. One more thing. I know we didn't get into this. Give the Lions their 2-point play. Gosh, that was cool. Let them have their 2-point play. They talked to the ref. Come on. Let these guys have some fun. I almost think they should eliminate that rule of you reporting eligible because, it'd be more fun if any one guy at any moment can get a touchdown on that offensive line. So that's your other
Uh,
statement that I have, Tom.
I disagree strongly
Controversial
with that one.
comment today. I just hated that game and the way it ended. It just rubbed me the wrong way. I know maybe it was the rule, but even as a Chief fan, that one rubbed me more wrong than Kadarius Toney one, just because it just, I don't know, Tom. That's just
It's
me.
not the referee's job to help you win your game.
All right, that's fair. All right, that'll do it for us this show. Thank you, Tom, as always, co-hosting, having a blast on Salute Your Sports. Thank you so much for the listeners, the viewers. You guys are great, and we will see you next week. Go Chiefs!